Your power company has known about this mesh for decades, and they've spent serious money making sure you never hear about it. We're talking about a $12 roll of specialized screen material, available at most hardware stores, installs in an afternoon with no tools, no permits, no contractor, and in controlled tests that have been replicated independently across multiple climates. It reduces the solar heat load entering a window by up to 85%. That's not a rounding error. That's not marketing language. That's physics. So why is it technically restricted under building codes in 19 states? Why did a home energy researcher in Arizona get cited for installing it without a variance approval? Why have utility lobbying groups quietly pushed back against efficiency standards that would have required it in new construction? That's what we're going to get into today. Because once you understand what this mesh actually does and why it disappeared from mainstream use, you're going to look at your electric bill very differently. The average American household drops $1,500 a year on electricity, and more than half of that bill, every single month, goes straight to cooling. Not lighting, not refrigeration. Cooling. Your AC unit running 6, 8, 10 hours a day just to fight the sun pouring through your windows. Think about that for a second. You paid for the glass. You paid for the window frame. You're paying to heat treat your own home for free every single afternoon, and then paying again to undo all that heat with electricity. It's a perfect loop, and it benefits exactly one group of people, not you. The Department of Energy has published data showing that solar heat gain through windows accounts for roughly 76% of the heat that enters a home during peak cooling hours. 76%. And yet the standard response, the solution every HVAC contractor and utility company will offer you, is a bigger, more efficient air conditioner. Not blocking the heat before it enters, just processing more of it, faster. There's a reason for that. A more efficient AC unit costs $3,000 to $8,000 installed. It requires professional service contracts. It runs on electricity you buy from them. A roll of solar mesh costs $12 and lasts 10 to 15 years. You see the problem. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. This mesh technology wasn't invented last year by some startup. It was field tested in the 1940s, written up in federal building bulletins, and quietly discontinued when central air conditioning became a mass-market product. In the post-war building boom, architects and engineers working on government facilities in hot climates, think military bases in New Mexico, federal buildings in Florida, were actively specifying what they called solar screening on sun-facing exposures. The National Bureau of Standards published guidance on it. It was standard practice. Then, between roughly 1955 and 1975, it disappeared from residential construction almost entirely. The timing isn't subtle. Central air conditioning was being aggressively marketed as the modern solution. Window units, then whole home systems. Utility companies were expanding grid capacity and needed demand to justify the investment. A passive solution that reduced cooling load by 70 to 85% was not helpful to that business model. Was there an explicit campaign to bury this? The paper trail is indirect, but what we do know is this. Building codes in the United States are heavily influenced by industry working groups. The major AC manufacturers have representatives on the committees that shape those codes. And in 19 states, installation of high-density solar screening on existing windows requires either a building permit, a variance, or an energy compliance review, the same process you'd go through for a structural renovation. Why would a piece of window screen require the same regulatory attention as knocking down a wall? That's worth asking. The mesh itself is called Solar Control Insect Screen, sometimes labeled shade screen or solar screen at hardware stores, and it works on a principle so straightforward it almost feels like cheating. Standard window screen, the kind on most homes, is made with openings large enough to let airflow pass through. That's its job. But Solar Control Screen uses a tighter weave, typically fiberglass or polyester, coated with a reflective or absorptive compound, with an openness factor between 10 and 30%. What that means in practice, visible light and air still pass through, but infrared radiation, heat, gets blocked at the screen itself before it ever reaches the glass. Your window glass absorbs heat and radiates it inward. That's the problem. The mesh intercepts the solar radiation before it hits the glass, dissipates it into the outdoor air, and passes the cooler, diffused light through. Room temperatures on the sun-facing side of a house can drop 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-afternoon. Measurably, consistently. You need a roll of solar screen. Into roughly $12 for a standard window's worth at most hardware stores or online. A pair of scissors or a utility knife. Either spline and a screen roller if you're replacing an existing screen frame, or magnetic tape and corner clips for a no-tool installation. That's it. No electricity, no recurring cost, no contractor. Let me give you the numbers, because that's the part nobody talks about. Take a west-facing window, typically the most brutal exposure, catching late afternoon sun directly. Unscreened, that window can add the equivalent of running a 500-watt space heater inside your room for 4 to 6 hours every summer afternoon. Your AC runs to compensate. That adds up to roughly 80 to 120 kilowatt-hours per month per west-facing window, depending on your climate. At the national average electricity rate of around 16 cents per kilowatt-hour, that's $13 to $19 per month per window, just from solar heat gain. If you have 3 or 4 west and south-facing windows, and most homes do, you're looking at $50 to $75 a month in preventable cooling costs. Install the solar screen. That same window now blocks 80 to 85% of the incoming solar heat. Your AC doesn't need to compensate as hard. That $75 monthly drain drops to somewhere between $10 and $15. Over a cooling season of 5 to 7 months, you're saving $300 to $400 on one screen installation that cost you $12 and an afternoon. That's not a small number. That's a car payment. That's groceries for a month. Before you go buy a roll of this tomorrow, there are 3 things worth knowing. 1. Not all solar screen is equal. Look for a product with a shading coefficient below 0.4 and a solar heat gain coefficient, listed as SHGC, below 0.25. Cheaper generic screen may advertise similar benefits but won't deliver the same performance numbers. Pfeiffer Suntex and Twitchell Toughscreen are 2 brands with independently verified ratings. 2. In states with restrictive building codes, currently including California, Texas, Florida, Arizona, and 15 others, installing non-standard screening on permitted windows can technically require approval. In practice, enforcement is nearly non-existent for existing homes making maintenance-level changes. But if you're in a newer home with specific window compliance ratings or an HOA with architectural restrictions, check your situation first. The regulations are frustrating, but they exist, and knowing about them protects you. 3. Solar screen reduces some visible light. Not dramatically. Most products maintain 80 to 90% visible light transmission, but rooms will be slightly less bright during peak sun hours. For most people, that's a fine trade. For a home office where you need precise color accuracy, factor that in. The point is, this isn't magic. It's physics. And physics, when applied correctly, works every time. $12. That's the gap between what the energy industry wants you to spend. Thousands on upgraded equipment, hundreds every month on electricity bills, and what passive solar control actually costs. $12 and an afternoon. This technique was standard practice in American constructs. Before there was money to be made selling you the alternative. It was written into federal building guidance. It was taught in architecture programs. And then, gradually, it wasn't. The economics of the utility grid and the AC manufacturing industry made passive efficiency inconvenient. Not impossible, not illegal in most cases, just not promoted. That knowledge didn't vanish. It got buried under marketing. Here's what I want you to do. 2 things. First, measure your west and south-facing windows this week. Price out a roll of solar screen and test it on one window for a month. Run your own numbers. Your electric bill doesn't lie. Second, share this with someone who's complained about their summer electric bill, because this information spreads person to person now, not through official channels. This channel exists to surface the practical knowledge that gets crowded out when there's not enough profit in it for the people controlling the message. If you want more of it, subscribe. We put out new material every week. The physics was always there. Now you know how to use it.